HCAM programming is supported by viewers like you. Thank you.
And by Angels Garden Center, growing in Hopkinton since 1957.
And by Hopkinton Drug, an integrative pharmacy and community partner since 1954, providing customized compounded medication in their on-site lab, nutritional supplements, and a knowledgeable staff. Hopkinton Drug, believing food, exercise, and community, along with an integrative approach to medicine, can help you achieve your wellness goals.
You're watching HCAM TV, and for more Hopkinton, visit HCAM Ed.
Townships and
Through
villages.
the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
Thank you. I was going to say, John, I don't think there'd be a Senator Ron Johnson from New England.
No.
Well, back when I lived there, there wouldn't have been from Wisconsin either. It's changed a lot.
Yeah, apparently Kansas used to be like a stronghold for socialists.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I think Eugene Debs was from Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Yeah.
I believe. You wouldn't guess that today, I don't think,
No.
for a major National Socialist presidential candidate.
Hello, Arnold. Welcome to Zach.
It's good to meet you, Arnold.
You're muted.
You're on
still
mute.
muted.
John, as host, don't you have control over unmuting people as well as
I
muting?
can ask him to unmute. I cannot force him
You
to
can't
unmute.
click, huh?
I just asked him to unmute, so hopefully we'll get like a button popping up. But well, it looks like we have a quorum.
Is there? Oh, there's Elise. That's 5.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. Shall we get going then?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Good evening. This open meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023. First, the new law allows public bodies to continue providing live, adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations of the public body instead of holding meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. Adequate alternative means may include, without limitation, providing public access through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing, or any other technology that enables the public to clearly follow the proceedings of the public body in real time. Second, the new law authorizes all members of a public body to continue participating in meetings remotely. The open meeting law's requirement that a quorum of the body and the chair be physically present at the meeting location remains suspended. For this meeting, the Zoning Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the ZAC agenda, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. As a preliminary matter, this is Ted Barker Hook, Zoning Advisory Committee Co-Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Please respond with present when I call your name. Mary Larson Marlowe.
Here, present.
Ron Foisey.
Present.
Arnold Cohen. Still muted though, Arnold.
Present.
There it is. Nisha. Absent. Madhu. Absent. Rachel. Absent. Elise I messed it up badly, Elise. I practice these things. Elise
It's okay.
Mihalowski
Here, present.
and Curtis Smithson, absent. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. John Gelsich.
Present.
Wonderful. I'm happy we have a quorum tonight. I think that our meeting is going to be fairly short, which is a good thing, I think. I'm looking at the agenda and I'm going to again put the last agenda item first. I kind of like getting the minutes out of the way. So let's do that first. Did everybody get a chance to read the minutes? I have one edit, I think, that I'll bring up first. Under proposed zoning article, I think that there's a sentence fragment, and I'm happy you're here, Ron, to offer a clarification. The minutes read, the draft minutes read, Mr. Foisey asked if the rounding to the nearest whole number rather than the next whole number, period. I'm wondering, I inserted was preferable, was intended. I don't know if you remember the question, Ron. Were you suggesting we make that change? Were you asking, was that change considered?
I was asking if it were considered, and John responded that he considered it and was recommending the other way, and that was fine.
Right. And that John did type up. He said it's consistent. I just wanted to make that a full sentence to make sure we captured why you brought it up. So I don't know exactly, John, what wording should follow whole number. Again, I suggested was preferable or was intended, question mark. Do you see what I'm talking about, John? Oh, now you're muted, John.
No, I'm muted. I think if I'm reading it, Mr. Foisey asked if the rounding to the if the rounding would be to the nearest whole number rather than
that would be a different edit too. That would work to make that a sentence.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would write. Would be. I'll add that in.
Okay. That's the only thing that I saw. Did anyone else see anything in the minutes? No. I would love a motion to accept and publish the minutes.
So moved.
And a second. Wonderful. Roll call vote. Ron,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Arnold,
Yes. Yes.
and Elise.
Yes.
And Ted is also an aye, so that passes. Wonderful. All right. We have two, I think that we can bring up two zoning articles, one at a time, obviously, for a vote today. Hopefully you got to look over John's latest round of edits. We'll start with the inclusionary bylaw. This was one, you'll remember the intent is the affordable housing units. The intent was to include more affordable housing. I was looking for the exact line. I didn't underline it. I'm sorry?
I'm going to pull it up right now.
Okay. The
The purpose
biggest,
of this article is to increase the inventory of affordable housing in.
there you go. There you go. I just didn't see it at my glance. It's the very first line, isn't it? I was looking in the middle of that paragraph. Anyway, the changes that John made had to do with applicability in A, number 1 and 2, I believe. Can you make that a little bit bigger, John? Please. There it is. And my memory, although John was generous to me in the minutes, was that I very clumsily suggested some of the changes we had, and John cleaned it up wonderfully. So those are those changes that, starting with a development with 5 units, would be required to have an affordable unit. And then after that, it's 10% rounded to the nearest number. The 10% was, I don't know if it was suggested, but it was approved by Mr. And now I'm having a blank again. Who was our realtor again? He's been so helpful to us.
Chuck Joseph.
Thank you. By Mr. Joseph. He said the 10% seemed a reasonable number as far as affordable units. And so we're keeping in that spirit with those edits. John, I had one other question. I was happy with everything else I saw. In the fees in lieu of affordable housing, when are those paid? If the planning board approves fees in lieu, is that a check that comes at the end of the development, at the beginning?
So usually it's prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy for whatever unit triggers the payment. So
Okay.
for example, in the trails, they have to make a payment at every 10th unit. So before they just made a payment the other day. So before they got the 90th certificate of occupancy, they had to make the payment. And then once I confirmed that that payment was received, then the building department can issue the C of O for that unit.
Okay. I did see I had one other note, and I think this comes from students of mine who don't understand how rounding works, or are hoping that I will round in one way or the other. In mandatory provision of affordable units, 210-60, you give examples of rounding. I assume 1.5 rounds to 2, even though it's not listed as one of your examples. We all understand 1.5 rounds to 2, yes, including developers.
They'll be told that.
Okay. Those were the only things I saw in this latest version. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or concerns?
Yeah, because this is my first meeting, so I haven't been involved in this. Actually, I'm kind of new to Hopkinton. Where I came from, I was previously on the planning board and the finance committee for quite a few years. So I just have a few maybe kind of basic questions. Just is this a brand new bylaw, or is this like a revision of an existing bylaw?
John?
So, through the chair, yeah. Why don't I just give Arnold kind of a background of the whole process? So this is just a revision of an existing bylaw. We already have this, but it makes it a little bit clearer, a little bit more strict, I guess if you want to call it that. And it changes how some things are done. So currently, if somebody builds a development that's 30 units, they need to do 3 units of affordable housing, but they need to apply for a special permit to do that. So we called it the flexible community development bylaw. All affordable housing needs to get a special permit. Usually this is simultaneous with whatever other application they're doing, whether it's a subdivision or a site plan or whatever. So it's usually just like an add-on permit that's heard at the same time. What this does is, because if we move forward with the MBTA communities, you can't have things that are not by right, thereby requiring a special permit or any other approval, included in the MBTA communities. So if we were to pass the MBTA communities bylaw, they would not be required to comply with our affordable housing bylaw, because you need a special permit for it. So we're changing this to make affordable housing essentially by right? You don't need a special permit to do what is already required of you. We are changing the threshold, which, through the chair, I have a comment about that after we're done with Mr. Cohen's questions. And then we're changing the option to locate the affordable units off-site and or a payment in lieu of the affordable units to the special permit. So if you do a subdivision of 30 units, you will have to provide 3 units on site. If you want to do those 3 units off-site or make a payment in lieu, you can then apply for a special permit to do those things. But otherwise, you could just do a subdivision plan and do the 3 units without any other approval, because they would already be looped into everything else. There really wasn't ever any discussion with the previous special permit. It was just kind of like this is what we're doing. It complies with the bylaw. Great, it's granted. We had it as a special permit because there was a density bonus that was allowed if you wanted to use it, but no one ever used it. So we figured it would be better to just do it by right, make it required, and then make these changes to have it be a little bit more seamless.
Has the town have sufficient affordable housing at present so that a developer couldn't build a 40B project, or are we below the?
So we're at 14%, but that's with the 2010 census figures. They haven't released the 2020 census figures. We estimate with the 2020 census figures that we would be around somewhere between, I think, 11 or 12%. So we've lost a percentage of affordable housing. We haven't lost any units. We've just added more market rate units without adding the same amount of affordable units in proportion. So we still need to get more affordable units to make sure in 2030 we're going to be above the 10%.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
John, you had comments about the.
Yeah. So I was talking to a housing planner today, and she had mentioned a report from MAPC, and I just took a look at it this afternoon, and I can actually share. She had a concern. That 5 units is not the norm to start at, and this backs that up. A lot of buttons to press. So this is the MAPC report for inclusionary zoning and payment in lieu units analysis. And this says most communities set the threshold between 6 to 10 units where IZ is triggered. So we've got it at 5. So that means if you did a 5-unit development, you'd have to have an affordable unit. The thinking is 5 units is kind of the threshold where you're not going to afford the affordable unit in terms of development costs. They say 6 is where you can kind of break even. So I didn't know if we want to change it to 6 units to be, generally in line with other communities and what MAPC usually recommends, or keep it at 5 units. I don't think it changes our intent that much. It just allows for relatively smaller developments to not have to do this. And then once you get to 6, then you're kind of getting into a little bit larger units or larger developments.
So I guess I have 2 thoughts, and then I would love to hear from the rest of the committee. My first thought is going from 5 to 6 by itself doesn't feel like that big a deal. And if that puts it in the realm of normal, then okay. My other thought, and again, I don't know if this would happen, is that math, I think, presupposes a certain size lot or value of the home, I would think, that you have to have a 6th lot to make the affordable one profitable or business savvy. One of my hopes was by doing what we're doing, it might help, and it might not. I have no idea. I'm a high school teacher. The disclaimer I throw out every meeting, but it might encourage more attainable size homes and lots so that the math for the affordable unit can make it so that the developer can still make money. But 5 versus 6 is not anything that rankles me all that much either.
And this may not be relevant to Hopkinton at this point. Oh, here's Curtis. But I think they were talking more in terms of multifamily developments rather than single family developments. So a 5-unit apartment complex or 5-unit condo complex is made a little bit more feasible without the affordable, whereas you might break even, or you get the 5-unit development with the 1-unit affordable at 6 units, whereas you would normally get a 4-unit development with 1-unit affordable at 5 units. I'm just bringing this up. I'm bringing it up as a point of discussion. It's up to you guys.
Sure. Of course.
I'm not trying to convince one way or another.
Elise?
Through the chair, if I may ask a question, I think John would know the answer. Excuse my ignorance on this, but does this count if somebody is building houses? Like if they're building 6 houses, they would have to make one of the houses affordable, or is it only for apartments or townhouses?
Nope, houses too.
So if somebody's building like $2 million homes and they build 6, one of them has to be affordable?
Correct.
Okay.
Or they would have to get a special permit for a payment in lieu or an off-site unit. So one other thing, Arnold, that this bylaw change is prompted by is we were getting a lot of 8 and 9 unit subdivisions so that they would avoid the affordable housing payment or the affordable housing unit. This would lower that threshold to have smaller developments or getting an affordable unit out of those minimally larger developments.
Yeah, so I don't know how this works out in other towns. I know I was in Sharon, which is maybe a little bit like Hopkinton, but we didn't have a bylaw like this. It just seems to me just that, as an attorney, say, experience, that builders, if they're going to have to, if they're going to build 5 houses, the way it's worded now, they might have to make one of them affordable. And the way it is now, when they build homes, the tendency is to build these, 7-figure purchase price homes. So I don't know how it works out, throughout the state when if other towns have these kind of bylaws, how it plays out in practice. But a developer wants to wants to make a profit. They don't want, if they don't think they're going to make money, they're not going to do it. They're not going to build anything. That said, I mean, I would suggest that probably 6 is a better idea than 5. I mean, no matter what number you set, there might be an incentive for developers to build one less unit so they can avoid that. Because it could mean, I don't know economically how much money it's going to cost them if they have to build, like Elise said, they're building $2 million houses. What would be an affordable house? What under the current standards, how much could they charge for a house if it's to be affordable?
So there are state standards. So I just want to point out that most towns, at least in Eastern Mass, have an inclusionary zoning bylaw. I don't know about Sharon, but it is very common to have one of these. And we already have one. But if you were doing an affordable housing unit, there's a formula set by the state that dictates how much you can charge for it. And, the whole point of affordable housing is to not allow for developers to only build $1 million homes, because if you're only building $1 million homes, people can't afford houses. So it's to build $1 million homes as well as $500,000 homes, and maybe in some communities, $250,000 homes. And then building homes that people who can only afford a $250,000 home could potentially buy, even if it's only by regulation under the state laws. So that's kind of the whole point of inclusionary zoning, is to include all different types of socioeconomic people within the same community and not exclude them. A lot of the times, these inclusionary bylaws are known as anti-snob zoning bylaws. And it's fully intended to create housing that's affordable for all incomes within every community.
I'm all for building, I think it's unfortunate that homes are so expensive. It's just my impression that developers, they don't want to build $250,000 homes. It's just the economics of it. But, we've had this in Hopkinton for a while, and so you've had some experience. And like I said, I'm on board if you want to change it to 6 units instead of 5.
Mary?
Right. Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, so for one thing, I'm just going to reiterate, I think I talked about this a couple of meetings ago. In practice, on the planning board, I've been on the planning board for 5 years. So at least for the time I've been there, there are no developments of houses that have actually built an affordable unit. Any of the ones that have been required to build an affordable unit during that time have used the payment in lieu feature. And in fact, if I recall correctly, there's no way for the planning board to refuse the payment in lieu if a developer wishes to use the payment in lieu. Yes, it says the planning board is subject to a planning board approval and things like that. So yes, they have to come before us and talk to us about it, but we can't refuse it. So the other piece is that it's significantly cheaper for them to do the payment in lieu than to actually build a house in the same development that they've been building. So again, this is for houses, not for apartments. There's been no apartment the plans that have gone through approval since I've been there. So, but that's just to give you a little picture, little color for it. And I personally think the threshold of 6 would be appropriate. Again, the most likely situation in which we will get affordable units truly built within the same development is when they're apartment units in this town. And I believe that developers are most likely, when they're building large homes and developments in large homes, they're not going to actually build a unit. They're going to do the payment in lieu.
So through the chair, this bylaw, Mary, I don't know, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood what you were saying, but this bylaw only allows for payment in lieu with a special permit by the planning board. And there's a specific finding that the planning board needs to make. Where is it? Such special permit may be issued only where the planning board makes a specific finding that there will be a significant net benefit to achieving the town's affordable housing objectives as a result of allowing the construction or rehabilitation of a dwelling unit on a different locus than the development or a payment in lieu. So they would have to make the argument that locating offsite or a payment in lieu is better than providing the unit on site. And the planning board has to make a finding to grant that special permit.
And so the planning board is getting more leeway,
More authority.
more authority in the future in terms of accepting a payment in lieu or building in a different locus.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
So when a subdivision application comes in and it's 10 units, it's assumed that one of those units will be affordable. And if they don't intend one of the units to be affordable, they would need to submit an additional special permit application for affordable housing, which then the planning board would discuss separately or together, but they would have to make that finding in order to grant the special permit. So, it gives the planning board leeway, but a planning board who may be hostile to affordable housing could argue that a payment is better than the actual unit in some circumstances, I guess. And if they make that finding, then they can grant the special permit. But a planning board that is diligent on affordable housing may be a little bit more strict in granting those types of special permits.
Understood. So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary.
I'm sorry. I should have. We may certainly see more affordable units being built, even in housing single family home developments in the future. If that is the case. So, yeah, if this passes, I still would say the threshold of 6 is appropriate. So.
John, you mentioned last meeting that one of the reasons the planning board might not accept payment in lieu is that the fund that we are building up is not being used very well.
Potentially. I mean,
if that were happening, I'm not making that assumption, but that would be enough of a reason.
Yeah. I mean, the other argument is every time we hear about a payment being made and it's $230,000, you can't buy a house in Hopkinton for $230,000. Right. So it's not really an effective payment, but that's the formula the state lays out. So the argument has to be this payment for a lower amount has to be more beneficial to the town to reach its affordable housing goals than a unit. I don't know how many situations that would occur in, but maybe it would if you do, an apartment building and those units might not be as much as a single family house, or other situations that present themselves may give the planning board cover to say, yeah, the payment would be better than getting another unit.
Are there any other comments? Welcome, by the way, Curtis.
You know how it could work is that
thank you.
If I could
go ahead.
Is there might be a home that could be purchased for $500,000, and then somebody could buy it, and you use the because they would pay $250,000, and then you'd use the $250,000 to get the full price. I don't know if $250,000 is what they consider an affordable home. It's I don't know if we're ever going to see $250,000 homes.
So, not to interrupt, Arnold, but we just got a payment from the Trails for an affordable payment, and it was $237,000. So that's what we're getting for an affordable unit.
Yeah, but I think you can use it. The person who's buying the affordable home, they're not paying zero for it. I think they're paying a price that's whatever their income or whatever the state says.
That's a strategy. That's a strategy that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund can use. They're still getting on their feet, but you can buy a property for $500,000, say, fix it up so that it's up to code, and then sell it back to the affordable, or sell it to the affordable purchaser for an affordable amount, losing the difference between what they paid for and what you've paid for. So like if you bought it for $500,000, you sell it to them for $250,000, you're out $250,000, but you just got a new affordable unit for $250,000. That is what was proposed originally for Chamberlain, is that they were going to go buy a house in Hopkinton, convert it to affordable, and then that would have been an off-site affordable unit. But since at that point the market was exploding, they couldn't find a house in time or in their financial range, I guess. So they opted for payment in lieu. So there are strategies that can be used, that the money can be used for. It's just, it's easier on the town to get the unit than to get the money.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments on this one? I often say to my students, I'm the teacher, so I get to have the last word. And now I'm the chair, so I get to have the last word. If we were talking only houses, I don't see any reason to go from 5 to 6. But if that's the math for apartments, I'm not going to doubt wherever John, and to me, 5 versus 6 for houses isn't that big a deal. So I'm also fine with shifting that number under 210.58. A net increase of 6 or more dwelling units, I'm fine with that, especially if it makes more sense for apartments and fits in the world of the realm of normal for this type of bylaw. With that change, do we feel comfortable voting on passing this one along to the planning board? Mary gives me a big thumbs up. Ron is nodding. Okay, so it's as written and amended, other than changing it to a net increase of 6 or more dwelling units from 5. Otherwise, I think the intent is all of there. And hopefully this will strengthen the planning board's ability to help us get more affordable housing. So if you are in favor of passing this along to the planning board, I'm going to do a roll call vote, signify with an aye. Mary
We have
Larson
to have a
Martin.
motion first. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about the motion. Could I get a motion to vote on this and pass it along?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Beautiful. Okay, now let's have a roll call vote. Mary,
Yes.
Ron,
Aye.
Arnold,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
Don't think I missed anyone. Ted is also an aye. It passes 6-0. 3, 4, 5, 6-0. Great.
Good.
Slide this back here on the table. Our next article that hopefully we can wrap up and vote on today is the EV parking article. John did some additional tweaks to it last time. The purpose of this bylaw is to support this mode shift to electric vehicles and encourage ongoing efforts to reduce the impact of fossil fuels on the environment and work towards carbon neutrality, etc. I think the bigger change was in reworking the math in section E, number 2. You can see what the change is there. I don't think I need to. That was another one where I made a mess of trying to explain my thought, and John cleaned it up. So I'm going to let John speak for that in the writing. And then John does say the number of spaces shall be rounded up to the next whole number. And then he provides some examples. I don't think there were any other edits from the last time we looked at this, were there?
There were. It's not, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal. So so everything that's green is changed from the previous version, by the way.
Oh, is that true?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I thought some of that was carryover.
No, I don't think it should be. So it's basically saying that the planning board is going to adopt and implement regulations associated with the bylaw. And that was a recommendation of several people, including a town council attorney who is not town council for the town, but is town council for many other towns in Massachusetts. And so what that does is that takes away these technical information.
Oh, okay.
So that when the technology advances, we're not going before town meeting for a 2/3 vote to change wording. So it basically says that everything is going to be, it doesn't necessarily change the intent or anything like that. It just says, level 1, level 2, DCFC are all going to be in the regulations that the planning board can change. And so in this is, it's to support a charging level set forth by the planning board and its regulations. That way the planning board, by majority vote at one of their meetings after a hearing, can change the regulations rather than go through the whole town meeting process.
I see. That makes sense. Is that the only other change, or did I miss anything else? That's what all the crossouts are.
Yeah, those were all technical things that I just took out, and those can go into the regulations when drafted.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments on the latest version in front of us?
So, through the chair, would you like me to give a brief overview for Mr. Cohen?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Please do.
So, this is a new bylaw, Mr. Cohen. Excuse me. It requires EV parking to be installed into parking lots when a certain development triggers site plan review for parking lots. So if you are either redeveloping a building or building a new building and you trigger site plan review, because site plan review is triggered if you are altering, constructing, or otherwise changing a parking lot of 5 or more spaces. So a new development would be building a new parking lot. A changed building may alter 5 parking spaces within the parking lot. So this would then trigger that. Existing buildings would not need to comply with this. And what it does is it sets forth a requirement for EV parking spaces. So you've got 2 different categories of EV parking spaces. You have EVSE installed and EV ready. EVSE installed means that the spots are wired and have a charging station at them. So you go to Wegmans or another place that has an EV charging, that's what it would look like. EV ready means that the conduit and all of the other infrastructure, aside from the electricity and the wiring and all that kind of stuff in the charging stations, all of that is installed. So just really the conduit, the charging station, the wiring, all that does not have to be installed. The difference is it's essentially twice as many EV ready spaces for every EV SE installed space. So you can provide, so like for this, in this example, B, parking spaces with 5 to 10 space or parking areas with 5 to 10 spaces shall provide 1 EVSE installed parking space or 2 EV ready parking spaces. So they can either install a space with a charging station or 2 spaces with the infrastructure that can allow a charging station to be installed at a later time. That's basically the crux of the bylaw.
With that, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I think that we're ready to vote. Could I get a motion to have a roll call vote and pass this along to planning board?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, back to the roll call vote.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I think that was Curtis, I think. Is that you, Curtis?
Yeah, I did. I think Ron and I both did. But...
Or Rurtis, just combine them. All right, with that, I'm just looking at your faces on the side here. Roll call vote. Elise.
Yes.
And a yes is to pass along to planning board. So yes. Ron.
Aye.
Mary.
Yes.
Arnold.
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
And Ted is also a yes. That's another 6-0 vote, I believe. And we can slide that one along. It feels good to move the papers back over here.
Yeah.
I'm going to dramatize it by really reaching. There, it's way over there now. Okay. What we have left on our agenda is where do we go from here? I had an email or two with Rachel and John. I looked at our notes from the open forum meeting. And here are the 3 big issues that I identified from the public forum and from what we've been doing. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rachel and I and John were thinking that we begin in earnest again and look at tree protection starting next week. And hopefully we don't spend too much time rehashing what we've already learned over the years. Arnold, we'll do our best to try to catch you up to speed as quickly as we can for what we accomplished the last time and a half, I would say, that we took this on. Last year, we kind of nibbled around the corners, but I think we mostly repeated things we'd already said our last term. So that's coming up. And I think we've already begun reaching out to other members of the community to help us with that. And I would love to put that on the agenda for next week. The next item I have came to us from Elise, which is talking about solar or geothermal requirements for new construction. I don't remember, Elise, if that was, I think that was residential and commercial in your mind? Or was that just residential?
In my mind, it would be both.
Okay.
I think Chuck said for residential, it could be tricky because of the cost. But I've talked to some other people who disagreed. So I don't know, maybe we could get some more opinions on that.
And I don't know, John, tell me to be quiet if I get too specific on something that's not on the agenda. I thought Chuck also mentioned the compass position of the roofs and how that might work. So I had a thought that maybe one way to find a middle ground was to, again, do a ratio of houses that would have, for a residential development, that would be retrofitted. In any case, without having that discussion, because it's not on the agenda, that was another item that I would love to take up. And I think the Sustainable Green Committee might be interested in working with us. John.
2 points. First, I just want to avoid any confusion. You said next week. I think you meant next meeting. I don't
Yes.
want anybody to think we have a meeting next week. We don't. But one thing that I've told everybody who's tried to help write zoning bylaws is if you can find an example of a town literally anywhere in the country that has what you're looking for, send it to me and we can try and mock it up or alter some things and make it conform to Hopkinton, because that's always easier to start from a template than to start from scratch. So Elise, if you know of a town or anybody who's even proposed doing solar in new construction, if you can find that bylaw, we can use it as an example to discuss.
I'm happy to do some research.
That'd be great. And I think reaching out to the Sustainable Green Committee might be helpful as well, if you'd like to do that before next meeting.
I know that the statute that has the zoning, the state statute, it defines what you can put in the zoning bylaw. So, I mean, before we move forward on something, do we look into that, whether the town has a power to put zoning requirements into like the geothermal heating? I mean, maybe there is. I don't know if it's an issue, but it just seems to me that's what occurs to me. I'm just curious as to whether with the state, I think it's chapter 48, what it says.
I'll offer one answer and then John, maybe you can expand. Anytime we've waded into, Arnold, anything where we weren't sure legally if we could or what we could do, we've gotten town council's opinion. And planning board often also checks with town council before it moves on to the next step. So I don't know off the top of my head at all if there are restrictions on what we can put into zoning requirements for those developments, but we are in touch with town council whenever we wade into those waters. John, do you have more?
Yeah, so I would say I don't know of any restriction from requiring solar in 40A. I will say that 40A has a section that equates, and we've experienced this just in amending our solar bylaw recently. They have a section 3, which is the Dover Amendment, and they've basically moved solar into almost a similar class as religious uses in schools where you can't unreasonably regulate it. So that means unreasonably regulate it as in keeping it out. I think they're doing everything they can to encourage more solar. So I'll take a look into it and see if there's anything prohibiting that. But I don't really see the state taking action to prohibit towns from requiring solar on new development. I think that's what they would be trying to encourage, if anything.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may interject, part of the reason I'm thinking about this is because if we're going to start requiring businesses to put in EV ready spaces, and we're trying to encourage people to buy, electric vehicles, and the state is doing that by requiring the sale of electric vehicles in the future, I feel like we're starting to rely a lot solely on electricity. And also they're trying to make some initiatives about cutting natural gas to houses. So they're trying to push all the heating and all the cooking to electricity, even for some businesses, which I know a lot of chefs are unhappy about. So before we just rely too much on electricity and on overpowering our grid, I don't know where it comes from, but it might be nice if we could sort of be a little more sustainable within ourselves.
And through the chair, just to kind of build off of that, the state is also pushing hard heat pumps, which are electric powered. And I don't know if it's the regular building code or if it's a stretch building code, even though Hopkinton is part of the stretch building code community. You are required to install plugs that support EV charging for vehicles in new homes now. Like, it's not even an option. You have to provide it.
Oh, wow.
So the state is making moves, like Elise said, to almost force the move to more electric powered things, with the assumption that these are going to be renewable resource powered type things. So yeah, I think it's worth exploring, if nothing else.
John, I'm just curious, for that requiring plugs for the EVs, is that level 2 type plug, not just?
I think it's a level 1.
Extension cord.
It's essentially the same plug that you use for your washer and dryer.
Okay.
But I think you have to have it in a garage,
Oh, okay.
which wasn't required before.
What if
And
there's
so
no
the-
garage? I don't have a garage. If they wanted to build a house.
So that may be the loophole. Is it's for all new construction. I think that may have a garage. If you don't have a garage, then maybe you're not required. I don't know. I haven't dug into it that much, but I do know that they're requiring it, and it's intended for EV charging.
So that is an item that we could take on, and it sounds like there's interest in the group in front of us for that. The last one that I saw, because while Airbnbs got brought up again, we've already determined that's not our bailiwick. That's for another world to deal with. Is a revisiting again of accessory dwelling units. And Chuck Joseph brought this up, and I know Ron agreed that he would like to revisit this topic. I'll offer my thoughts for whatever it's worth. I think if we took this up, it would be the third time in the last 6 years that we take on this topic again. And for each of the last 2 times, the expanding the size of the ADU was didn't pass. I say 6 years because, Mary, you just said you've been on the planning board for 5 years. And I think the first time we did this was when we had the 20-person Zach at the senior center. And I think that's when I first remember taking this up. And I think that you were only there for 1 year before you were on the planning board. Mm-hmm. So my first thought, I am not a fan of taking this up. I don't get to make the call. I don't want to make the call because we've already done it twice. I do still worry about it being used for rental purposes, which is not the point of it, even though Chuck Joseph said he doesn't think that's a worry. And as a solution to affordable housing in town, I feel like this is a backdoor way, a way that was not intended for accessory dwelling units. And I would prefer to see what we just voted on earlier, the inclusionary zoning would do for affordable housing first. John, those are the end of my thoughts anyway.
Great. So related to that, something that Zach may want to take up instead of ADUs is revisiting the village housing in residential districts and garden apartment in residential districts. Those are 2 essentially multifamily districts that are on the books, but are not applicable because we are above 10%. They only come in when the town is below 10%. So it may be worth Zach taking a look at those and potentially reformulating them to be active at all times, but with different requirements that may reach the goals that the town is looking to reach, and maybe avoiding the ADU issue through that.
I remember I see you, Mary. I'll be right there. I remember a public forum a couple of years ago where Ron Nation was asking us to revisit garden apartments. Mary?
I would agree with John on the garden apartments and village housing units. And I was always amazed that when I was reading those, I'm like that they were only applicable for when we were under the affordable housing. But also another bylaw is the conversion of homes to multifamily unit. So conversion to, apartment units essentially. So that's another bylaw that affects all of this. And actually, I think might be more likely to be used to create more affordable units than the village housing or garden apartments, which is new construction. I mean, just judging by, the town as it is right now and what's available, what available build opportunities we have. Not that one should trump the other. I'm just saying that that's another bylaw to look at. So, okay.
That is one we tweaked a term or 2 ago, isn't it?
We did. But it may merit another look.
Okay. John?
Another one that I can't believe I completely forgot about, I'm trying to push it to the back of my mind, is the MBTA communities. We need to get started.
Right. I assumed that was always lurking until we get more information about it.
We may as well put it on because it's going to we have to do an action plan, which I've already started filling out the form for. It's not a super intense form, but that needs to be filed by the end of January. And then a bylaw needs to be approved at town meeting by December 2024.
I would strongly, I'm sorry, through the chair.
Sure, go.
I would strongly encourage, John, that you take the form that needs to be filed by the end of January straight to planning board rather than going through us and then planning board, just because of the time frame and the fact that it's it is checking a box, really, and there's not going to be a lot of discussion necessary here to do that. But the next steps definitely need to be on our agenda.
Yeah, so the form doesn't actually need to get approved by any board. I can go and do that, file that myself, because it's really just an update to the state.
Okay.
But we need to get the work started in order for me to put in certain dates and certain activities within the form to fill that out. So I think starting with Zach on the MBTA communities is a good first step that we can add to the form and say, look, we're doing it this way. We're going through the advisory committee, and then we're going to move it on to the planning board as our normal zoning review process.
Good.
Elise?
Through the chair, how many, I know it's changed many times since I've seen it, but what is our requirement that we need to do right now, as of right now, for
Regarding
Hopkinton, for MBTA?
Oh,
Like
Because
how
they
many
keep
units
changing
and
it,
stuff?
because they're like, oh, now you're further away from the train station, so we're doing less. And like, what steps do we need to do as from Zach? What does Zach need to do as our next step in terms of
So I think
planning?
the next step. I think the next step Zach has to do, through the chair, sorry,
ahead.
is start looking at what areas you may want this to be located in, and then I actually just got an email this evening that we're going to get technical assistance for MBTA communities, and hopefully they'll provide us like an example bylaw. But it would be looking to where in town we want to locate these districts, because now we can do multiple districts. And it doesn't have to be within half a mile of the train station. But we need to zone for 750 units. And we have to zone for, I think, 15 units per acre. So we're at the minimum of what they require for an adjacent community. And then so aside from looking for where in town we need to locate these, the next step Zach would take is modifying the example bylaw to be what Hopkinton wants it to be.
okay. If our inclusionary development got passed through planning board at town meeting, would those rules apply then to this new?
Yes.
Yes, so it would apply to all that. So that would also include, you must have affordable housing to go with these new apartments that help us meet the NBT.
Yes. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to change the bylaw
Right.
now, is because otherwise it would have required a special permit, and they would have said, any developer would have been like, well, it's not by right, so I don't have to do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they would win.
Yeah. And I think you answered that question earlier when you were explaining it to Arthur. So, okay. So that's on the agenda. More thoughts on ADUs and affordable housing in town. Ron, go ahead. I figured you probably had something.
Just, over the last several months, in August, September, October, I've seen 3 recent Boston Globe articles on why accessory dwelling units are the best approach for affordable housing. So I'm just, I know people in the past may have said we don't want to do that, but I think there's a lot more publicity now because of the affordability crisis that we're in to continue to explore options. And the ADU bylaw that we have in place already has pretty strict regulations around it. And the only thing that the Economic Development Council was recommending is just taking the size from 800 to 1200 to get that done. So again, I'm still plugging along for having that be part of the agenda.
Ron, I wonder if you could, either through John or unless it violates public meeting law, could you forward along a couple of those articles?
Sure. I'll shoot them over to John.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've read the same articles. I was going to say, make an observation similar to Ron, but it's my sense that it's probably the easiest way to maybe get more affordable housing. I mean, I know that that's what people, like these Globe articles are saying that would be a step toward doing it, and that might get more than, with requiring this 1 unit per 6 or whatever. And it's kind of, seems to me it's kind of an easier way to do it. So it might make sense to consider it.
I'm not against considering it. We 6 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the size of it. And I don't have the ADU regs in front of me right now, so I can't remember the language in them. But my memory is what they were intended for was, and what Chuck Joseph brought up was, to help out family, either elderly family or young kids who were out of college. And then the last time we talked about it, we also expanded what we thought family meant, that you don't have to be married. It can be kind of a common law marriage. The size, though, given what it was intended for, my own thought is 800 square feet is more than my mother-in-law has down in the senior housing. And she has plenty of room to live really very comfortably there. When I moved into my house, it was, I think, 1,400 square feet. And to consider a house my size accessory dwelling struck me as odd and too much. That said, again, if the committee wants this to be a heartier discussion, I won't stand in the way. John?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify something that Mr. Cohen said. There's a difference between capital A affordable housing and lowercase a affordable housing. We like to call lowercase a affordable housing attainable housing rather than affordable, to not mix them up. ADUs would not be affordable housing because they would not have a deed restriction requiring that they remain affordable in perpetuity, and therefore they would not go on the town's subsidized housing inventory. They would be considered attainable housing potentially, but the rents that would be charged for them would not be restricted. So if Hopkinton saw a huge growth of population, they could raise their rents to $5,000. You can't do that in affordable units. And that's the point of affordable units, is that it remains affordable no matter what. So I think they could be I have thoughts about them being a worthwhile strategy for attainable housing. I don't think they achieve the same thing as the inclusionary housing bylaw, because that is purely for affordable housing, which is a different animal. But we can talk about that more if we put this on the agenda. I don't want to get too far afield of what this agenda topic right now is.
Because it's not officially an agenda topic and we can't go too deep. Is that right?
Well, we're talking about the topics.
Right.
I don't want to go too far into the actual topic.
With that said, then I'll back off what I was going to add on. Go ahead, Mary.
Forgive me for not remembering this, but did we just send some changes to planning board? Did we already vote on it to send it to planning board for this next year's ATM? On ADUs, I mean.
No, the only thing Zach recommended was the change to the site plan to explicitly allow solar on rooftops.
Okay, so that's the only one. Okay.
Yeah.
That was just my question, because we must have done one last year, right? And then
or maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah. So okay, gotcha. That's it.
Are there any other thoughts on ADUs and how high a priority they should be for us, Mary?
And that I'm not going to answer your question directly. I'm sorry. My recommendation is that when we tackle that topic, and call it whatever you will, affordable housing options, right? All of those bylaws that are related of ADUs, conversions of homes, village housing, and the other one, that we read all of them. And then we say, okay, probably the most helpful one would be this. Let's work on this one. That's my suggestion. But I'm not the chair, so go ahead.
And I like that suggestion. Curtis, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any thoughts? If you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mary. I would probably just call the topic affordable/attainable housing options to be explored. And we can look at the four different options and discuss, the merits of all of them. And
okay,
if we can come up with a plan to move ahead.
Here's what I think I'd like to propose. I think that our last bit of conversation, I like Mary's suggestion, and I like Curtis's agreeing with Mary. That means this is a huge discussion to have, and an important one to have. I think that Planning Board has asked us to think about affordable and attainable housing. I think all of us are thinking about it anyway. But that got really big really quickly. We've already, I think, made promises to different people that tree protection would get a real sound hearing again. And I absolutely believe our town wants us to talk about that. I'm going to propose that we take these three topics in the order that I proposed them tonight. I didn't think it through when I brought them up. I think looking into the solar or geothermal is really a very focused discussion, one that doesn't get too sprawling too quickly. I think that affordable, attainable housing gets big very quickly. My only other hesitation with, and I think it needs to be that big, this is not me saying it shouldn't be, I get worried about fiddling with too many levers at once to try to solve or suggest solutions to problems. We are already suggesting the inclusionary law. We fiddled very recently with conversion into multiple family homes. We fiddled recently with ADUs, and it might be wise, or at least not to fast track a discussion on affordable, attainable until we see if any of those other tweaks are having an effect. So I'm proposing we go in that order: tree protection and solar for our next meeting. And of course, we have to do the MBTA communities as soon as John has something for us there. My guess is affordable, attainable would be almost impossible to get on town meeting coming up, but we can do that conversation February, March, April. Mary? I can't hear you.
Are you muted?
I was assuming that all of these priorities we were discussing were for the next calendar year and the 2024 ATM, not for 2023 ATM.
They certainly could easily end up being that way anyway.
Okay, so if there's anything that you can fast track beforehand to do on 2023 ATM, yeah, you can try that, but I don't think you'll have time.
The warrant opens on January 1st and closes beginning.
Oh my gosh, January 1st. Oh, closes when?
Beginning of February. So we have the month of January the month of January at this point to really figure out. If we
spend some of the next meeting looking both at trees and solar requirements, then we might have a sense whether the solar is doable in that short amount of time. Ron?
Just at the budget meeting last Thursday, the town chief financial officer said there's likely to be a special town meeting in December for the schools. If that's the case, we could have a second shot at getting something and doing it, shooting for that December special town meeting. I wouldn't recommend doing that for a planning board article, but if the schools are going to do it,
right. Oh, that's a good thought. That's a good thought. I like that. Elise, did I see your hand pop up or no? No? Okay. Any other thoughts then? All right. So I think what we will have, and then John, you tell us if we need to have MBTA on the next agenda as well. But we'll have trees. I will again put in phone calls to the couple of people I've been reaching out to help us think it through. and invite them to the meeting. Maybe Sustainable Green Committee wants a member at the meeting. So John, we will talk later, but it sounds like trees, solar, and MBTA is our next meeting. Does that work for you? Is that not that sounds fine?
So I think that works. I don't know if we want to do one each meeting instead of having all of them at one meeting.
I don't know either. I guess it depends on how messy it looks like they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend maybe doing one at each meeting.
Okay. Do we have those meetings set? Should we spend some time tonight with that?
It does not look like we have them set, but the pattern is usually what, the second and fourth?
Doesn't meet?
Yeah, the second and fourth Mondays of the month. So the next meeting would be Christmas Day observed, so not that day. And then
isn't this the greatest way to celebrate Christmas with us sitting here? Mary can change her background to wintertime, Madison.
So January is a little wonky because the 2nd is New Year's Day observed, and so planning board moved their meeting from the 2nd to the 9th, and then the 16th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So the planning board is meeting on the 23rd, so the 9th and the 23rd. So if we wanted to meet on a Monday, the next available Monday is the 30th, but we could always meet on a different day of the week and meet earlier.
Okay.
For example, Tuesday, January 3rd doesn't have anything.
Okay. If we only get 2 January meetings, the only thing we're going to have any remote chance, if we wanted to try to put something on the warrant and through planning board, would be solar on new construction. Does that sound true? And I don't know if that's possible in 2 meetings, but it seems like that's the only thing we'd possibly have a crack at. Can people, Tuesdays is Conservation Commission for me, but that's every other week. And
that is on the 10th.
Do you happen to have those? Oh, that's on the 10th?
Mm-hmm. The 10th and the 24th.
So which, did you propose the 10th a second ago?
No, we could do the 3rd and the 16th Tuesday.
No, 16th, the 17th.
17th, sorry.
But I have a design review board meeting on the 17th, so I would not be able to attend the ZAC meeting.
But we could do the 3rd, and then what was the Monday, the 30th?
Yes.
Yikes.
Yikes is right.
So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer or anything like that, but we do have potentially 3 zoning articles going for a town meeting. I don't know if we need to have 4.
Yeah, that could be true. I like feeling like we're making progress, but all right.
I mean, it's your town, so I'm not going to tell you what to do.
If we can get some affordable housing, will you move here?
I'm happy in my town.
Can we do, what was that Tuesday? Or what was that Tuesday you're proposing in the
Tuesday
3rd?
the 3rd.
What are the thoughts in the room on Tuesday the 3rd? That's a thumbs up from Ron. I'm fine with it. All right, why don't we do that, and then we'll keep the Monday the 30th. Let's make, do you think you can get homework done, Elise, by Tuesday the 3rd to bring to the meeting?
I will try. We're going away for my kids' school vacation, and I'm going to be without my mom and with my 93-year-old grandma. So I feel like I'm going to be taking care of everybody in the house.
If you could forward to me any progress you begin to make, I could see if I could build on it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm also going to reach out to the Sustainable Green Committee and see if they're willing to help me.
That would be great. That'd be great. All right. Why don't we do that then? Why don't we do that then, John? Make solar/geothermal our big agenda item on the 3rd. We'll figure out the 30th when we get closer. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
I'm seeing some nods.
I think so.
Good. All right. With that, unless anybody has any other announcements or anything, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And
Second.
a second. Beautiful. Roll call vote. Ron, would you like to adjourn?
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Elise,
Yeah.
Arthur.
I mean, Arnold?
Oh, I'm sorry, Arnold. I'm sorry,
get-
Arnold.
I was
It
somewhere,
said
I get that
A.
a
I
lot.
took a stab at it. I'm sorry. I should have looked at my other notes.
A
Was that a yes?
lot of people call me Arthur. Anyway, yeah, yes.
I'm sorry about that. And Curtis.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, John, for everything. Thank you,
Thank
Bob Hamilton.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Meeting
Good
you,
night.
Arnold.
Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Well,